ধন্যবাদ।
Ah, just a sec. I am getting it ready. Okay, so let's start. It's already 12:32. Let me. Are you able to see the PPT and hear my voice, guys?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and is the PPT moving?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's start. I have combined again unit 7, 8, and 9, and now you will see how MDI 8 and MDI 7 are converging. Labor implications of transforming production systems. So we in 7 we are talking about labor processes. In 8 we are talking about production processes, and both are applicable on the labor market. And now you will see how these both units are converging. Again, I'll repeat, do read MDI 8 first before you read MDI 7, and you need to take out bits and pieces of both 7 and 8 to construct your answer in your examination. For questions in both 7 and 8, you can interchangeably use to construct your answer. So 7, 8, 9 units are about job insecurity, vulnerability, quality of employment. And as we had talked earlier, today global production is either in the form of global commodity chain or global production networks. Both are more or less the same thing. Different scholars have defined it differently. Commodity chains are producer driven, buyer driven chains. And these chains typically came about over decades because capitalism wants profit. One of the ways to increase profit is by using technology or better production process, or the second way is to drive down costs. And inevitably the global north sets up these chains so that the production happens in global south, where the wages are lower, the laws are weak. Global south is desperately clamoring to increase their production facilities and give employment, and it suits the global north fine, because that way they can push down their costs and make more profits. So we have seen this over the last few units of 7 and 8. Quickly, outsourcing and contracting more often are using interchangeably, but outsourcing is shifting the whole function, whereas contracting is specific parts of a job. So that is the essential difference between outsourcing and contracting. And this restructuring of production has happened since 70s, transitioning from Taylorism to Fordism to post-Fordism, increased precariousness of labor existence. And why this thing happened is because when the Industrial Revolution happened, and there was a factory means of production, they wanted to streamline processes, improve technology. Taylorism came about, scientific management of production process. Fordism was in terms of an assembly line, and Fordism led to mass production and mass consumption. This production and mass consumption led to increase money in the pockets of people, increase money, and the parallel development of globalization in terms of better transportation, faster transportation, and in terms of better means of communication, allowed people to travel, allowed people to see and experience different cultures. And this led to people having preferences of the products that they buy or consume. This led to individual preferences of products rather than mass production. Now, the companies cannot invest so much of money to cater to individual production. This led to contractualization, outsourcing, offshoring, so that various production products are produced based on preferences at various places, which will push down the costs. Expansion of non-standard form of employments have come in, like the casual labor, flexible job, informal employment. In fact, the whole term used is informalization of workforce or informalization of economy. It has led to privatization of welfare, accompanied by growth of contingent workforce, non-standard employment, part-time work, subcontracting, self-employment, use of temporary help agencies, on-call workers, and sweatshops. So, as the production methods changed, so did the labor market and the labor force. So the whole concept of permanency, permanent jobs, social security, everything has evaporated over a period of time. Job insecurity, lack of benefits, deteriorating work environments coupled with de-skilling, less pay for part-time workers for the same amount of work. And all this has put the organized labor also under increasing attack, both from big business and government, because inevitably, remember, governments need taxes. A large part of the taxes come from big businesses. Also, the whole politics, the whole concept of politics and democracy is about elections. Political party needs funding. The funding comes from big businesses, and that is why there is this nexus between governments and big businesses, indicating an erosion of social compact between organized. So, subsequent to the industrial revolution, as time went by, and with industrial revolution, with the Great Depression and the Keynesian economics coming in, where the Keynesian economics talked about government intervening in businesses rather than leaving them alone in terms of supply and demand. There was a compact which got established between labor, big business, and government. That compact is in terms of labor union, in terms of unionizing, in terms of fair wages, in terms of timing of work. Now, this compact seems to have broken up. So let's sum up some of the earlier units that we did. Unit 3, early 80s economic globalization, deep transformation in which production of commodities were organized until then. New vocabulary such as offshoring, outsourcing, global production networks, global uh, framework of analysis, the way production is reorganized under capitalism in the late 20th century and after. But if you notice, there was the putting out system in the Middle Ages, and outsourcing contracting is similar like a putting out system. So in a way, as I keep saying, history of the world is almost cyclic in a way. Everything goes in a cyclic fashion. In fact, I had put out a video in your groups where this commentator, journalist commentator Farid Zakaria, had explained how in the 30s the US president had put tariffs on various countries, including Canada, and how the same thing is happening today, and how in the 30s the tariffs were put to protect agriculture, and now it is to protect industry. And unfortunately, as I had explained to you before, when the world shifts and the paradigm shifts, it's very difficult to go back into the original paradigm, irrespective of ideological commitment, that longing for the old. You have to keep moving on. Economic globalization since early 80s have altered these convergences between capital, labor, production, and geography. Rise and spread of new business models as well as production models. Production no longer bound to a factory or a territory, but spread across. So we had looked at in unit 3. I hope I'm not going too fast. Please tell me if I start going fast. Guys, I'm not going fast now.
No, sir.
Okay, okay. Keep giving me feedback, otherwise I won't know. What made this transnational economy coordination possible? Okay, perfect. Cost advantage and revolution in IT communication and transportation. So irrespective of the fact, politics and identity politics will keep ratcheting up, anti rhetoric, for example, US is currently in an anti immigrant rhetoric. People will, and especially these transnational connections, this globalizations, this faster communications and transportation, as I keep saying, once you have shifted the paradigm, it is very difficult to go back. Summing up units 4, 5, and 6, what we did last time: diversification of India's occupational structure has been slow, yet the labor force is moving away from agriculture. That is also happening because of social consideration. As population increases, as family sizes increase, land holding gets split up between the children. Smaller land holding is no longer tenable in terms of economic considerations. Then there is a consolidation in terms of privatization of land holdings. So all kinds of movements are happening. Also remember, in the real world, there is just not one engine which works. There are multiple engines of work at play. There is a social engine, there is an economic engine, there's a political engine, there is a globalization engine, and so on and so forth. Aspect of Indian labor market is relatively low labor participation, and that is one of the reasons, is because women, especially rural women, are extremely less in the labor force. Despite inauguration of economic reforms, workplace participation has hardly improved. And also because of all these movements and all these technology components, India is going through what was the term used as jobless growth. So even in spite of the GDP growth, there are not enough jobs getting created. And then the problem arises because India has a demographic dividend. In fact, it's got a large population in the working category or the labor force, and if they are not working, then they are not contributing to the economy of the country. Self-employed workers in agriculture, especially females, accounted for a significant part of increase of employment. Half of the workers are self-employed, and it's not just they want to be self-employed, there are not enough jobs, and sometimes not any jobs at all. Unorganized or informal sector encompasses range of employment. So even if you are in a permanent employment but do not get a social security, it's almost like an informal sector. The informal workers, informal sector constitute informal economy. Informalization of the workforce, in which the proportion of workers in the informal sector grows relative to the total workforce. And also remember, as I had said, if people do not have money in their pocket, there is the aggregate demand of products does not rise. Aggregate demand, if does not rise, then the production will not happen. If the production is not happening, workforce will get unemployed. It's a cyclic process. So let's look at the objective of this unit: global restructuring of production, and the relation between state capital and labor have transformed stable employment, regular jobs, into unstable, precarious employment. How changing organization of production is impacting capacity of trade unions and workers. So how is this changing production techniques impacting the trade unions? Are workers or unionizing? Are they trying to organize it into union? And so on and so forth. So this is how the global restructuring of labor has happened. Taylorism to Fordism to post-Fordism, rise of non-standard employment, which is casual, flexible, part-time, subcontracting, self-employed, freelance, temp agency workers, on-call jobs, sweatshops, privatization of welfare, and growth of contingent workforce. And this is not just a situation which is happening in India, it's happening all over the world. So this is how restructuring of labor is happening. And as I keep telling you, this restructuring of labor is because of restructuring of the production processes. So the key issues then become job insecurity, low wages, lack of benefits, de-skilling and unequal pay, erosion of organized labor, attack from big businesses, breakdown of Keynesian era social compact. Understand one thing, because at the end of the day, all production processes behind any product or service is labor, and the labor is an embodiment of human being. These compacts were brought into the picture between government, between big businesses and labor, so that the labor is taken care of, or essentially the human being is taken care of, leading to better productivity, better economy, better profits, and so on and so forth. Suddenly, it looks as though everything is up in the air and everybody's out there to fend for themselves. So, what are the impacts on jobs and livelihoods? Informality and all these leads to two-tier workforce, less and less directly employed, and increasing number of employed through contractors. Now, problem with contractors is there is no oversight. And if there is no oversight, then what prevents the contractors from underpaying or not paying or abusing the labor, or making sure that even basic subsistence is not met? Difference are there in the form of wages, benefits, job security. So think about it. If a person, if the labor, who's an embodiment of a human being, does not even have a security of two meals or education for the children or a household for the family, unless he or she is in dire need or is forced or is trafficked, what will be the motivation for that worker to work? And if there is no motivation, then inevitably the production processes, the quality of the product, and so on and so forth will suffer. Accompanied by increasing feminization of both labor and survival. In fact, unless a lot of cases, it's the female which supports the household income. Everything has become so difficult, and when things become difficult and money in the pocket goes for basic subsistence, then obviously the aggregate demand will go down. It's basic economics. Informal economy employs about 86% of the country's workforce, with 90%, 91% of the women workforce. Increasing burden on women to secure means to run households. So in case there is a question as to how the changing production methods is impacting households, these are the points that you mentioned. There is informalization, there is casualization, there is contracting, there is feminization of workforce, burden on women, informal economy, and so on and so forth. And the reasons for their vulnerability. And listen, that's what we are studying in MDI 9 about vulnerabilities of people. And then these vulnerabilities put them at risk of criminal gangs. Irregular work, low economic status, no bargaining power, lack of control over earning, paid work with care for children, no access to institutional credit, training and information, lack of assets. And then you will have news items about parents forced to sell children because no food or this or that. And unequal gender relations play a very important role defining it. So, say, for example, a country like India, caste considerations, class considerations, gender consideration also play an important role in the insecurities. Industries in industrial towns are preferring, for example, Gurgaon, Manesar are preferring. In fact, somebody was telling me about in Kerala, The Keralite business owners are preferring migrants to locals because of various reasons. Same thing out here, preferring migrants to locals so they may practice flexible labor market policies, casual and contractual employment patterns, a short supply of labor, low wages, insecurity, high risk. It becomes sometimes good for governments and businesses that the workers are unorganized, because organization then leads to an addition complexity in terms of negotiations. And again, it's not an Indian phenomena. Look at Amazon. Amazon actively discourages workers from unionizing in America. So capitalism remains the same, businesses remain the same, capitalist across the world remain the same. Migrant workers, high vulnerability to distress, higher perception of jobs and income insecurity, afraid to raise their voice, end up working at lower wage. So essentially, it's easy to get various works done out of migrants. You can push down the wages. They will not speak up. They will not, organize. Quality of employment. Market driven neoliberal paradigm, it was cast as a panacea for India's problem and global problems. Un- Unfortunately, it's deepened India's employment crisis, period of jobless growth, informalization, protection of workers, less protection, increasing precariousness of working and living conditions. So if you come to, let's say, a place like Gurgaon, the stark disparity between various sets of workers is there to see. Stark disparity in terms of living standards, in terms of working standards, and so on and so forth. In fact, more often than not, when you are answering a question in your examination, look out from an experience, because all of you have experience and you can look out from your experience and answer questions. So it will be easy for you to answer questions that way and clear the examination. Policy changes induced by globalization, creating of low quality employment, increased casualization, denial of labor rights, violation of occupational health and safety norms, intensification of labor and wages barely above subsistence labor. In fact, when you look around in terms of workers, in terms of sweepers on the road or construction workers or painters, you will see that most of them are working without any safety equipment. In case something happens to them, there is no security cover, no safety cover, no health cover, and so on and so forth. Problematize the notion of wage labor and standard employment as full-time permanent employment with benefits. In fact, one of the things which is said was, when contractual work was coming in or the regular work was being contractualized, the trade unions were opposing these contract workers. And in fact, if they would have not opposed the contractual employment or informal employment, but pointed out or pushed for better working conditions, things would have been different in India today. Worsening condition of work, increasing work intensity, increasing productivity without concomitant gains for labor. So that is the quality of employment that we have been talking, because of the shifting ways of production, increase of flexibility, and mostly people say that all these flexibilization and informalization is there in the daily wages. Remember, labor is everything which include manual and intellectual work, But in fact, a lot of flexibilization is there in intellectual work also. So even if you're working in a corporate sector, remember there is no job security. You can be fired at will. You are supposed to work long hours. That is itself a flexibilization. You have no pensions in terms of security. They might give you possibly a health cover, but that is only applicable till the time you're working. And with the constant hire and fire policy, that is itself a flexibilization. There is no job security. Loss of hard-won rights, right to strike, job security, social welfare program, lack of employment in times of jobless growth. In fact, one of the biggest things which happened in India was Manrega, which allowed a certain amount of fixed days employment, which gave us kind of a security. In fact, Manrega allowed a lot of people to come out of poverty. In fact, it increased aggregate demand in the rural areas and so on and so forth. There is a flight of capital to low wage, cheap labor locations, or the threat of flight as a means of winning labor's docility. So, if you do not do this, we will close the factory. So, the labor has no choice but to say, okay. Deregulation by state agencies inscribing a free market principle as the norm for globalized neoliberal. So the term is neoliberal. Neoliberal is nothing but neoclassical in a new form. Workers are being used as disposable commodities without regard to their survival. Worldwide rollback of social welfare programs. So again, as I said, this is not a Indian phenomena. It is a world phenomena because the term, economic term, which is being used is neoliberal, and the narrative which is dished out is at the end of the day you're getting jobs, or you're getting production facilities, and you have to compromise for this. Have led scholars to re-examine the assumption of a standard job comprising of full-time wage employment with benefits, which was what happened post the Industrial Revolution. Post Ford, in the Fordism era, there was a fixed job with fixed time, wage employment, benefits, and normal working hours. Everything post Fordism, everything has evaporated. Increasing fragmentation of workforce, of labor force, flexibility in employment arrangement, standard and non-standard working along, not only the same industry, occupation, but also doing the same job with different wages, with different, way they are treated. Earlier, part-time work was a business strategy to address labor shortages. Today, part-time work is a strategy to subordinate and control labor, extract maximum surplus value, weaken organized labor movements, avoid sharing with labor gains acquired through increase in productivity. For example, Bokaro Steel Plant, oldest steel plant, used to employ 55,000 permanent workers, now employs 20,000 contract workers and 14,000 permanent workers. So the whole workforce itself has reduced, and out of that, almost more than the almost double the permanent workers are contract workers. So if you are following, U.S. Army goes through contractors. A lot of wars are done by contractors. The immigration and control agencies, the ICE of US is also a contract agency. Similarly, the Agniveer scheme of India is a contract way of organizing fighting force. So every aspect of a nation is going into a contract or a informalization of workforce. So there are obviously consequences to it. Very poor cannot sustain themselves, often borrow money, leading to debt. That debt leads to vulnerability, that leads to increase of trafficking. Structures such as caste, class, gender, and region leads to vulnerability and systemic deprivation. When we have again started getting or reading news items about starvation deaths in various places, access to capabilities, therefore to functioning itself, to determine the nature of social relations itself are under stress. So if think about the fact, if the wife or the mother also has to go into the workforce to sustain the family, who takes care of the children? What about the nurturing, upbringing, if both parents are away, or if the father has to migrate or the mother has to migrate? So there are social factors to that. Leads to gender vulnerabilities, caste and class vulnerability. And inevitably we have seen certain jobs which are caste based, or castes are kept out of those jobs, leads to vulnerabilities. And those vulnerabilities then possibly leads to those people migrating either to cities or internationally, or go into a debt trap, and so on and so forth. Now let's look at how the organizing is changing. There is no single union form approach or strategy that can address the multi, because now everything has been split up and fragmented. The work has been fragmented. If you see, your media has been fragmented. Everybody is receiving information or news through different channels. So how do you unionize? Initially, the unionization was when there was a single factory, there was a shift, there were multiple people working in the same shift. So you go together, you come out together, you eat together. Obviously, it was easy to unionize. Now, with all these, outsourcing, with this contract work, different contractors, there is no coming together of people. So to unionize them or to fight for a particular cause has become that much more difficult. There is a different contemporary organization challenges. And the term is LPG, liberalization, privatization, globalization regime. And this is the model that has been followed by India since 91, when the liberalization of the country happened, weakening the strength of established trade unions, heavy retrenchment, plant closures, changing productivity norms, and incentive schemes. So think about the fact today, there is a set of workers in urban clap, the gig economy, as they say. There are a sort of workers in Swiggy, there's a set of workers in Zomato, there are a set of workers in Uber. Obviously, everybody is trying to make ends meet. How do you expect them to unionize or claim for a better, working conditions or better pay and so on and so forth? The liberalization, privatization, and the globalization model, the LPG model. So you can definitely use the LPG model, the term, in constructing your answer. Led to confrontation with union and subsequently dismissal and termination of workers. In fact, a whole lot of industries follow the contract route, so that there are less permanent workers. With less permanent workers, they are not able to come together and unionize. But obviously, now the way the organization is happening is changing recent years. Contrary to dominant perception, trade union membership is picking up. Economic slowdown, increasing impoverishment of workers is pushing. For example, there was a strike by Zomato workers in Hyderabad or down south somewhere. So, irrespective of the fact that these workers were in a gig economy, they were part time workers, they were contractual workers, they were able to organize, go for a strike, try to negotiate some better conditions. There's been a rise of independent rank and file led unions, including contract workers, agriculture workers, informal sector workers. There is a trend for unionizing because at the end of the day, remember, things are always cyclic. And once a particular point is reached, then things start coming back. Many unregistered unions that function as a union in spite of not attempting to register. For example, there have been major cases of workers in Amazon, I think Facebook or Apple or Microsoft, they also try to unionize or have unionized to register with the labor department. Uh, because of the active collusion with the government, a lot of these unions are not registered. Worker militancy has not recovered, and the power of balance of power continues to tilt in favor of employees as the statistics on strikes and lockouts increase. In the 80s, we used to hear uh, regularly in terms of a state band or a nation band. Like, for example, we used to have a number of Bharat bands and used to be quite successful. There was this famous railway strike. So because, for example, all these people, and remember, at that time there was no WhatsApp and social media to connect, and yet these major strikes happened, which led to unions able to take better deals out of government or other employees. Now we have connectivity, we have everything, but because of informalization, the unionization is not happening. Also important to note, India has not ratified the ILO Convention number 87 on freedom of association, protecting the of right to organize, or Convention 98 on the right to organize and collective bargaining. You don't need to remember these ILO numbers. You can just say, if you're writing that not ratified ILO conventions on the right to association and organize, both in law and principle. Plus, the Indian state has the power to invoke what they call as ESMA, or Essential Service Maintenance Act, which prevents essential services people to go on strikes. So, what are the challenges in unionizing contract workers in India? One is a systemic issue and legal gaps. In the absence of any legal provisions that it must be done. And then what, as I said, employers do is keep their units small, do not hire more people, give it out for contracts. Essentially, and in the absence of government monitoring or regulation, these are systemic issues. Then poor implementation of Contract Labor Act, non-registration, unregulated contractors, automatic licenses. So, you are giving a work to a contractor. There is nobody overseeing the contractor, whether the contractor is paying fully, the contractor is taking care of its worker. As long as the work is done, you don't care, or the company does not care. Precarity and vulnerability, hire and fire policies, lack of places. A whole lot of organizations do not get pay slips. These people who are supposed to be permanent employees are actually deemed as contract workers, so they don't need to give pay slips. In the absence of pay slips, security benefits are not given, and lack of support. Face eviction from union engagement, long hours hinders participation. There is a vulnerability for migrants. We saw during the COVID how the government decided to do lockdown within 24 hours, not thinking about how these workers are going to sustain in the absence of work or any assets or savings, and in the absence of any transport, how do they go back home? There were all these pictures of workers walking, migrants walk. Suddenly India woke up to the fact that all its cities had migrant workers, which is actually a lack of support. And then there is all these legal gaps, because who is picking up this cause in terms of judiciary, in terms of law enforcement? Hostile environment. Union activists are harassed, jailed, or labeled as extremists. State complicity. Labor department, police favor contractors. Government themselves employ a large number of contract labor force. In fact, if you see in your cities, there is a hostile environment for migrants. There is almost, they are stigmatized and criminalized, that these guys are like this. Employer tactics and legal undermining of labor rights, contract system exploitation. Inevitably, the companies do not care what the contractor does as long as the work is done. The contractor, in turn, exploits the workers. There are sham contractors to mask employee-employer relationship, deny legal rights. There's a judicial apathy, increasing side with the capital over equality. Because again, at the end of the day, the kind of workloads on judiciary, there is vacancies in the judiciary sector, there is no focus. Union busting innovations, reclassification as supervisors to remove workers from union coverage, misuse of apprentice act, apprentice used as cheap labor without legal protection. So unpaid internships is kind of an apprentice in an industry. Unpaid interns are given work, they are not paid, they are made to work full time with a promise of employment. Actually, it's unpaid work. Broader impact: erosion of trade unions, weakening collective bargaining, institutionalization of unfair labor practices. And this is all in line with the global production systems, the LPG liberalization, globalization, and privatization, all falling under the umbrella term of neoliberal policies. Precarity in the unorganized sector, working condition, exclusion. We have talked about it. Majority from marginal background face discrimination, poor housing, lack of services, lack of IDs, exclude them from public services, make them vulnerable to police harassment. So inevitably, if there is anything which happens in the neighborhood, the first thing what police comes and picks up the migrants. Invisible and unrecognized work. Domestic, home-based, sex workers not seen as workers. Labels key roles. For example, Anganwadi Asha as volunteers. Now, as soon as they are labeled as volunteers, the government does not need to give them any, benefits. Erasure of worker identity prevents access to rights and protection. For example, in the Agniveer scheme, now if an Agniveer dies in training or in duty, he is not entitled to a compensation claim what a regular army person is entitled to. It's a contractualization of the fighting force. Barriers to legal protection: no clear employer-employee relationship, default target for so what typically happens in terms of a Zomato worker meeting with an accident with no social benefits or no health cover? Who does he protest, or who does the people of his family protest against? It's an app based system. There are no brick and mortar offices, or if there is one, it is somewhere else. Or let's say Uber, which is not even an Indian company. So more often than not, such people, then government becomes a default target for demands, and government cannot do anything. Social security laws are weak and poorly implemented, lack legal access, and lack legal access. So what does that guy? So there was this video of this army person beating up a gig worker in Karnataka. It was narrated as a language issue. Later, it was shown that actually there was there was a road rage kind of a thing. What does that worker do in terms of grievance handling? Expensive judicial process, legal access resources uh, which are slow. Workers organize through slum based, or so this is a new way of organizing, grassroots organizing. So for example, domestic workers in Mumbai protested unfair pay sets by resident RWAs. Gatwu, Bangalore emerged from community organized in garment workers, neighborhood. Badam workers in Delhi fought for recognition. But so there are case studies in which these organizations are coming out. People are trying to organize, albeit slowly, but it is happening. So they are organizing through workplaces where they through where they stay. So if they are staying in slums, then organization is happening in slums. Then there are emerging worker alliances. Informal workers are forming unions, association with formal sector unions, NGO and research institutions, national and international working people's charter. So there are ways. Today internet becomes a place where internet also and social media also becomes a way for people to organize. WhatsApp groups have been formed in terms of messages being passed on. And then there is a cross sector collaboration, informal and formal workers joining forces to resist labor law dilution, pushing for universal like 2015 general strike saw unprecedented informal sector participation, raising independent demand. Again, these are very precarious. It becomes because inevitably organizing and then with an active suppression by the government. For example, when the Maruti workers organized and went on a strike, there was a very active government help in trying to break that strike. A lot of workers were arrested, they were deemed as criminals, and so on and so forth. Worker protests increasingly treated as a law and order. Police brutality, arrest, and denial of bail. And again, it's not just in India. I keep repeating this. It's not just in India. It's across the world in terms of the liberalization, privatization, and globalization, in terms of change of production processes, in terms of governments being complicit with the capital, constitutional rights like assembly and collective bargaining. Think about the fact, as a democracy, why does a protest need to take a police approval? There is no reason. A student protest or a worker protest does not need any police permission because anyway the police is there. And yet the way the rules have been framed that you need a police permission almost deems to be that it's a criminal thing. A state corporate policy judiciary nexus repressed labor activism. So criminalization and stigmatization of labor. Capitalism targets stigmatized labor pools, caste, class, gender, sexuality. Caste biases define roles in domestic work. Discrimination against sex workers, queer workers, transgender individuals persist. So there are all kinds of stigmas or discrimination or biases in the real world, which leads to these workers being able to unionize or come together or organize. Workers misclassified as volunteers. Paid stipends, incentive, not wages. Lack of identity cards or recognition. Government resists regulation and labor law inclusion. Because inevitably, again, as we had seen in the earlier slide, there's a nexus between government, between judiciary, between police, and between the capitalists. Workers misclassified as volunteers. White collar discrimination. Air hostesses face bias based on age, appearance, unequal conditions for male versus male counterparts, beyond informal sectors into formal white collar environment. Women across the world are discriminated compared to males. Shifting labor landscapes. Traditional labor, for example, waste management, which was earlier done by individuals, have been privatized. Postal service replaced by courier firms. Gig and platform workers face harsh conditions. Gig, incidentally, is a word which has come from the music industry, where you do a temporary job and move. Because these are new organization models. New frontiers of unionization. Growing interest in union among platform and delivery workers, retail, mall, spa, and restaurant workers, IT and people sector. So all these things, all these contra movements, counter movements keep on happening. Things, albeit become slow because of the diverse background, because everybody is on a sustenance basis trying to make ends meet, and yet, all these things are happening. Okay, let's sum up. Diversification of India's occupational structure, slow, and yet the labor force is moving from agriculture. Low labor participation, workforce participation also low, again because of the women workers. Uh, More than half are self-employed, don't need to be. There is a jobless growth. A range of employment arrangements. No longer employment means a permanent job with benefits, with specific working timings. There is an informalization of economy and the workforce, in which proportion of workers in the informal sectors grows related to total workforce. LPG, again, as a term, keep remembering to use it in your various answers in MDI 7 and 8. Liberalization, privatization, globalization regime, or the model under the neoliberal economic theory. Economies more market oriented includes reducing government control on foreign trade and investments, privatizing state-owned enterprising, enhancing the role of private sector in economic activities. Public-private partnership means what? This again a term to go in for an LPG. has been significant in altering labor relations, affecting collective bargaining power, and leading to job insecurity. So LPG is the term, and the concept of informalization, growing trend of employment outside the formal sector, lack of job security, absence of social security, poor working conditions, absence of clear employer-employee relationships and regulatory frameworks. There are some references which you can see in all three units. Let me stop and hi guys, any questions?
Sir, I just wanted to say that when we talk of labor, we are looking at gig workers, blue collared workers, who, but what in the normal course of events, we do not consider a normal corporate worker. They are also not unionized. And in case a corporate organization declares bankruptcy, these people are actually, without any sort of protection. Like, for example, in the case of
Kingfisher.
Kingfisher, Cox
Correct,
and
correct,
King,
correct, correct.
these are very well-known organizations, and even engineers who were working there, when they stopped giving them the salary, these people had rent and EMIs to pay. So, in fact, the government itself has, if somebody just goes and declares bankruptcy, there is precious little that a corporate worker can do. Theoretically, we can say that, yeah, you can go to the labor court, and like Cox and Kings, I know, for example, that people went, the minute they declared bankruptcy, the staff were told you file some papers, which they did. But this happened in 2020, early before the COVID, or sometime around COVID. Till now, they haven't got their dues, and we all know that it's not going to come to them. So I kind of feel that, there has to be a mechanism or a change in the bankruptcy laws wherein a corporate is first supposed to pay the employees. There is a caveat in the law which says you're supposed to pay vendor first, but not the employees. Just my 2 cents.
So Sophia, you need to understand, and that's where the narration is like this, that labor is typically looked at as manual work. As soon as the narration starts, or more people understand the fact that labor includes both manual and intellectual work, number one. Number two, more often than not, these white collar workers, these corporate workers, these engineers, and all these people working in the corporate, they think they are different from the manual workers who work in industries. But
Yes, sir.
they themselves are actually in an informal arrangement because there is no job security. Today, the highest paying employee in any of these firms, multinational firms, actually is an informal contractual worker because there is no job employment security, and the person can do pressures because there's a hire and fire policy,
Yeah.
and because of the fact there is this class divide, and also the class and caste divide occurs parallelly in India. There is this class and caste
Hmm.
divide. These guys do not want to unionize or be seen with the manual labor workers, so they think they are different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because of this fragmentation, unionization, and obviously unionization is frowned upon by the capitalists and by the government, and there is this nexus between government, judiciary, with the capital. So anything which happens, these guys are left to fend for themselves, while the manual workers still are able to come together. These guys are too busy, in class, caste, and all kinds of things, pretty much on their own. Sophia, you are absolutely right. Jet
Yes.
Airways, there are so many
Yeah.
examples. Jet
Yeah.
Airways, so many companies, these people have not been paid. And because of the fact their reluctance to be classified as labor, and to come together is leading to this. And then the larger narrative. Look at the larger narrative. Look at the larger media narrative that welfareism by a state is freebies. Now
Yeah.
that's a
Mm.
narrative. And unfortunately, the educated middle class is buying that narrative.
Yeah.
So once, please understand, at the end of the day, media also is complicit in the larger capitalist model, because remember, the media is also run by capitalists. And
That's
at the end
also.
of the day,
Mm.
the capitalism is only looking at making profits. They don't care about anything else. So it then becomes important for people to also see, it doesn't the as they say, the clap can happen with both hands.
Mm.
Now one hand does not seem to be doing anything, so the other hand is only slapping you.
Yes, sir.
So but these are the ways which are happening across the world, in terms of that liberalization, privatization, globalization, under the larger heading of neoliberal economics.
Mm.
Okay, so
Yes,
again,
sir.
as I keep telling you, in these classes, one of the objectives of the class, besides acquiring information, getting perspectives, understanding the subject, is to also write an examination. So you need to craft your answer based giving on these examples. Sophia?
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Okay, any other question? Okay. So in case there are no other questions, I keep repeating, in case you want the PPT, you can write me an email and I'll send you the PPT. Otherwise, this is anyway coming on the YouTube channel, so you can see the presentation. I will reiterate and repeat every time. Do not get stuck with the economic part of it. Sometimes the units are written in a particular way where you might get stuck. Keep it simple, so you are able to understand the essence and craft an answer and write your examinations. Okay, so have a nice afternoon. I'll see you at 5:30 for MDI 9. See you then. Bye bye then.
Thank
Bye
you,
guys.
sir.